Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I'm your co-host, Dev.
And I'm the other co-host, Hugh. And on today's show, we will be looking at minute 17, which takes us from Dr. Oatman's office through Grocer's office, which gives Dev a lot of chance to talk about offices, and moves us just that little bit closer to Grosse Pointe itself. Joining us today on today's show, and all this week, is Catch You Later, GPB fan extraordinaire. Welcome.
Thank you.
I feel like I should be soliciting for job offers for commercial realty at this point.
Why?
It feels like I'm just talking about commercial realty throughout this entire film. And I'm not entirely sure why.
You're the one with the obsession. I mean, you're the one who said that you didn't think his original office actually exists in real life. So, this is just a logical extension of it.
It does feel like one of those things that you only ever see in movies. I have to say, if we're going to talk offices, where the hell is Grocer? I've never been able to make sense of that. I thought he was living in some kind of Howard Hughes-esque clean room at one point, because it looks like there's an air duct at the back and it looks like plastic sheeting, which I later realized on review watches was actually glass, but really fucking filthy glass.
So gross.
And he's got all of the blinds closed. He looks like he's kind of living like I did when I was a teenager, in as little natural light as possible.
I mean, is it possible that he's in one of those converted trailers like you see on building sites that are offices?
Oh,
that's a good call.
Oh, that would make total sense. I'd never.
Do you know what I mean? Because he's so crammed in against the window. He's got that junky old PC, and I don't know that kind of. Why else would you have all the the glass and everything be close in? I don't know. I just don't imagine him being the kind of guy to go out of his way to rent a good quality office Martin did. Martin's office is the one that you think Martin's office is the one you expect to see Dr. Oatman at, right? Like we were saying before, that I can well imagine that Oatman is in the same building to his great horror, and that Martin just walks out the door, just walks down the corridor and goes in, and he's like, done it, can't get away from him. But yeah, Gross is definitely in something a lot cheaper.
And we can also tell immediately, Grocer does not have a secretary.
No.
He doesn't have Marcel. He's doing all of it himself. He's at the computer. He's very much the kind of, I'll run everything myself. Yeah. He's got the kind of what looks like the takeout bag of food, set on the desk. Everything about Grocer just makes me think kind of slightly dysfunctional, divorced detective, as I've said before. Everything about his vibe just screams that.
Yeah. I like to think that if you were shooting this movie today, that his setup would look exactly the same.
Yeah.
But it would still be the clackety, it wouldn't be newer tech. It would be that.
Yeah.
That is the newer tech.
Still rocking the CRT keyboard and the screen.
No nice monitors for him. Yeah.
Which version of Windows do you think he'll be on?
I mean, this has got to be DOS 3.0 or 3.1.
I think it says, does it say 2.5 at the top on the left and corner of the screen?
Oh, I'm going to have to
now we have to check
and find out. Hang on. Preparations have begun in good faith.
ComV 2.5.
ComV 2.5. I'm not sure that's the OS.
No. That's the connection, because it says at the other end, connect at 14400 board. So that's just his internet connection.
The War Games font.
I know, right?
What's the name of the Sandra Bullock movie?
What, The Net?
The Net. When was that released?
I seem to recall within a few years of this, because I saw both of these in the cinema. So The Net was The Net's 2 years before this.
Oh wow!
So I think that kind of underscores that Gross is already using fairly old tech, because I mean, Sandra Bullock is using significantly nicer things that's 2 years earlier than this, and this is a time when tech is advancing pretty fast. 97, obviously Windows 95 was already in existence, so, and he's definitely not using Windows 95.
No, exactly.
I have an iMac. That's all I know. That's my, I don't know, DOS window things.
I think this is a guy who kind of started this job in the early 90s and just has not wanted to advance with the times at all.
Well, it was also a matter of cost as well, because like at that point I still had my Amstrad from 1990. I still had it and was using it at that 97 because I couldn't afford anything else. And
I'm
Windows
sure that's not a problem for Grocer though.
Well, yeah, but he's not that kind of guy, is he? He's not the kind of guy who's
there we go. It does what it needs to do. I don't need a new one.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You can tell by the phone that he picks up as well to call the FBI.
I like that he can just call the FBI.
Yeah, that's kind of funny, right? Like this comes back to the point we made. You guys were making last episode that maybe there is some sort of semi, sanctioning of these guys.
I mean, it feels like you have to have established a network like that to be able to operate in this field for any length of time, right? These are not guys that are coming up the other way, right? That are coming up through the mob or through like career criminal contacts. These are guys that have come the official way in, right? Like, so they're not mob hitters. Their connections are not with the mob directly. I'm sure they establish them over time as those organizations look for contracts. But these guys have definitely started on the official path and will have to maintain some of those relationships to be able to keep operating, really, right?
I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? There's going to be crimes that they commit as hits that they don't want investigated as hits, and if the person is sufficiently enough of a dirtbag in the eyes of the law, then they can presumably convince somebody to not go too far down the road of investigating, and especially if they went in the army together or knew each other some way or somehow. I mean, it is interesting when you say about these networks and they're coming at it the other way, because one of the things I discovered, oh crikey, must have been a couple of months ago, maybe not even that. Teaching Kennedy's assassination in school and doing every year, I find myself doing more research because there's always more to read and stuff to look at. But one of the things I didn't realize in periphery to all of this is that the famous incident of the KKK killing civil rights people in Mississippi, which became the movie Mississippi Burning, with Willem Dafoe and Gene Hackman. The original incident, the FBI were doing such an terrible job of trying to track down the murderers, not least because of the local office being full of people who were pro, if not members of the KKK, that they ended up using a mob assassin who had turned informant 2 years earlier. And they went to prison, got him to help, got him out, got him to go and put the lean on these people and use his techniques to get them the information they needed, and then put him back in. And it's like, wait, this really happens? Like I was reading this going, wait, they actually used a known mob assassin. I mean, he'd gone down for 8 murders, but he was rumored to have committed between 24 and 36 before he turned state's evidence. And the FBI were like, oh, that's the perfect guy to send after the KKK. But there's the fact that they were, it was the 60s, but even so, I suspect there is I suspect the fictional tradition, beloved of television in particular, of using people in criminal arenas for law enforcement. I suspect there is something there at the root of some of these ideas, and I think your point is well made, that these guys are already starting out as part of an approved government service. So, I imagine some of them go into this sort of illegal way, and some people go into the more legal way of using their skills. And why would they not stay in touch?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I should also apologize because we have jumped right into Grocer in his office, and we've completely skipped the best line of the entire.
That's okay. That's okay. That's okay, because now we can take our time with it.
let's rewind back to that and
Okay.
Yes.
and
Yes.
talk about, going out into the world and giving things a shot.
Or not.
Or not.
So, well, where do you want to start? I mean, we left the last episode. We left the minute at where the therapy session between Dr. Oatman and Martin Blank is coming to an end, or with a clear decision being made, and I find it ironic that I don't think it crosses Martin's mind that when he says, "I just want a simple answer, should I go to my reunion or not?" and Oatman goes, "Yes," that Oatman is saying this to get him the hell out of his hair straight away. Like the way he looks, the way Blank looks at him just doesn't register. It comes back to what you were saying last episode, Katja, about this whole business of, what kind of guy was he before all of this?
Exhausting.
People always, yeah. Yeah, and did his lack of understanding of other people, his lack of empathy, was that always the case? But yes, first opportunity, and so I'll let you guys have the great line to say it.
So, I mean, I'm not sure we need to repeat it. I feel like everybody who's ever seen this film will probably remember this line.
Yeah, but for the ones who haven't and are listening to us,
yeah.
I'm not saying the line. You say the line.
I mean, it requires two, right? It's dialogue.
Well, I mean, it basically, look, here's the thing, right? Oatman says, "See what it feels like." Okay? And then Martin say?
What's her face? Debbie. See what it feels like.
Yeah. And Martin says,
"All right, I'll give it a shot."
Yes, and then without pausing for breath. No, don't give it a shot. Don't shoot anything. And it's and he says it while shaking hands, and he says it like it's a perfectly normal thing to say, even though it's quite clearly not. And it's also said without a hint of being funny. There's no air quotes in his delivery. It's Arkin being Arkin in the best possible way, just being brutally honest. Don't shoot anything.
No.
I
think that that's where I get the idea that this is called a dark comedy and other things, but that I can almost talk myself into it being a slice of life, a dark one, a weird one, but I could see that just by the way that everybody plays everything so straightforward. There aren't any winks. There aren't any air quotes. There aren't any eye rolls. It's all played straight up and down. And that's the way that I could see it as a slice of life in a weird way.
I mean, in that sense, I think it's got a sort of thing I don't think I've brought up before on the cast is I feel like the most important reference for Detroit in crime fiction is Elmore Leonard, right? The late great Elmore Leonard, who was an incredible fiction writer and started out in westerns, and then many of which were made into great films, and then gradually shifted into writing hard-boiled thrillers somewhere around the late 60s, early 70s, which again eventually started being filmed as well. And he's widely regarded as the preeminent influence on Quentin Tarantino, who kickstarts this entire 90s wave of indie crime picks that we mentioned in the previous episode. And so Leonard's style is all over this era of film. The one that is an actual adaptation of one of his books at the time is Be Cool. Get Shorty. That's one of his, and the sequel Be Cool was also, which is ironically the book Be Cool is his version of what it was like to make Get Shorty, as in how awful the Hollywood experience was. Anyway, Leonard is one of my heroes. I've met him very briefly, and I'm really thrilled at that. And but one of the greats, and I've read pretty much everything he's done, but I haven't mentioned it in relation to this film because I didn't feel like, I feel like they make Detroit, because we know that they don't film, anywhere near Detroit itself. We know that it's all filmed there. It's not actually that kind of film, but then that's what a lot of the productions of his books did, was they just moved the books elsewhere. This is very common in most filmmaking industries. You just set it where you can film it. And actually, it's only until you get to not even Jackie Brown, it's Out of Sight, that you get an Elmore Leonard film set in Elmore Leonard's Detroit, like the way it should be. He's got both Florida and Detroit. And I feel like this film knows this. I feel like somewhere in the DNA of this film is this awareness of why he has to go back to this particular place, in addition to the slice of life element of John Cusack and his mates rewriting the script, making it about where they came from, and adding in all the music, and making it, personalizing it. I feel like there is also this kind of, but this is also a town where people, or a part of the world where people expect violence, but they don't expect it in our nice suburban area. And I think that's where I can really buy into your idea of the slice of life, because this sits in the same kind of territory for me in its own way, without being as extreme as Hot Fuzz.
Oh,
right, like Kim, my partner Kim, always jokes that Hot Fuzz is a documentary because it was made like two towns over from where she grew up. Right, and like the accents and everything, like when she gets angry, that's how she sounds like, right? She can do those accents and stuff. And yeah, I mean, like we even recognize the train stations that the cop stops at in the earlier part of the film when he's on his way out to the country, because we're like, oh yeah, that's the one that's three stops down from where we live now, but that whole idea of like taking a normal setting and then pushing it, pushing hard to make it a Hollywood thriller kind of thing, except that doesn't quite fit with the world you're putting it in, and that's right. This is doing that already. I feel like this is doing that already.
I think, to Katja's point about this being slightly slice of lifey, is that unlike a lot of black comedies, and Hot Fuzz is a good example of this. There's not much, I should say, exaggeration in the film. There's not much over dramatizing, overreaction. There is in a few places. I think the Ultimate blow up and the end sequence as well, where the action goes up a level. But everything else is played very low key. A lot of it is very dialogue-y. It plays out like just a kind of fairly level-headed show, really.
I mean, there's this thing about when you're talking about what things that push, we did say that the scene where Grocer and Blank meet each other out on the edge of LA to talk, and the way that they're edging towards the Sergio Leone dance of death, except we're much better, we're much slicker now, and actually we don't have to show the gun kind of thing, except that neither of them they're just so twitchy, and that we said at the time that's verging on overplayed, and I think that's where they push it. I think every time you get around to the action, they push it. But then I'm reminded of his secretary's reaction to him in the office, right? Like the way she creeps around. And actually, it's incredibly carefully done when, where, how. I mean, again, I don't know who do we thank for this? I mean, we know that the director shot multiple takes of each scene. We know he allowed them to do it. He said, here's a straight take of the script. Right, good, we've got that one. Right, let's do a totally funny one. Right, okay, now go nuts. And he sewed it all together in the editing suite. So I don't know if we have to thank Armitage for this. I'd like to thank him for it, certainly. But I feel like that's the skill, because when you look at his earlier film, Miami Blues, that's the thing he knows how to do. He knows how to create that balance. And as you say, the reason, the action, we'll talk about it later, obviously, when we get there, but I think part of the reason that the action also kind of steers between the comedy of the Ultimate and the kind of more ramped up reality of the later part of the film, I think that has a lot to do with understanding that the stakes are being raised both emotionally, and therefore the action has to match that. Otherwise, the action means nothing. It's the whole business of making action out of character and character out of action. Martin has to fight harder and dirtier and for longer to get what he wants. And I think that's part of the joy of this film, is the escalation. You know, where the film starts off at, it's not where it ends up, and it's very cleverly done.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, anything else on this minute? I think we've talked about the computer. We've talked about the office. We've talked about and we talked about the FBI. Now, just briefly and interestingly, because we've talked a lot about that, I just want to say one thing, which is I find it interesting how Grocer is more than willing to give up Martin, even though he knows what the risks are. I get the feeling like it's not quite a game for him. But in the same way that he went and messed up that earlier hit, I feel like this is his way of playing a game with Martin. Like, he doesn't actually think they're going to get Martin. He's just like, hey, you gazumped my job. Boom. Here's some trouble for you. But he kind of figures Martin's going to deal with it. I feel like that I don't know. I don't know what you guys think. That's how I'm reading the way Aykroyd delivers the lines.
I also think that there's sociopathy at play, right? Like, I don't think I think he is reaching for some way to retaliate Martin, and that retaliation is, well, I'm going to call the cops on you because you took the job that I was gonna do, and it's I don't think he ever really thinks about the consequences of anything he does, particularly. He just has no real concept on, like, empathizing with anything that anybody else experiences, particularly. And so he's just like, this is revenge and it makes me feel good, so I'm going to do this.
That's what I think it is. I think it just feels good. And that they also knew each other in a professional capacity. I mean, there's history, and sometimes I think it's on Grocer's part that he just enjoys it. That this is just fun for him. It's almost bullying, but in their world.
And that's why he wants to be the top dog in his union. Right. And I think he's kind of very much that way. And he's it's not like he's acting on any sense of kind of trying to improve his own position, right? Because we see at the end of the movie that, he's the one, as much as anybody, that takes out the FBI with no thought to the consequences of that, because there will be consequences. Right?
Consequences.
I mean, maybe not for him because he doesn't get the opportunity to experience them, but it very much feels like he's just a guy that lives in the moment and has no thought for anyone or anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Should we speak about Ambassador Bridge?
Please do. You guys do.
Have you been to Detroit? Because neither of us have.
No, okay. I've not. I mean, I've flown over it, but no, I've not been to Detroit. But I love the shot.
It is a beautiful shot. And we may get a few more clips of it in the start of the next minute. So maybe let's lead into the next minute and see how it goes. Because we also see a beautiful little B-roll shot of the cars driving into Grosse Pointe.
If I'm remembering right, which it feels like they're circling down into Grosse Pointe Blank. And then at the end of the movie, they're coming back out. But I don't know if that's a feeling or if that actually happens.
I think there is some editing to that effect. Okay. That it very much feels like, okay, now the story is diving into Grosse Pointe and everything becomes very Grosse Pointe centric. And then at the end of the movie, as they're driving out, everything zooms back out to there being a bigger world. I definitely feel like there is an element of that happening.
Yes.
Yeah, I like it. All right.
Okay, this was minute 17 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers and co-producers Dev Saligar and myself, Hugh David.
Today's guest, as for every day this week, is the lovely Catch, GPB fan extraordinaire. I don't know if I'm ever going to get GPB out a slick way first time. It's
so funny.
I'm tripping over myself on that one. You can find them on where can we find you actually?
North Bay Derby. That's where I'll be hanging out.
Awesome. And you can catch us at all good podcast players, as well as YouTube, X, formerly known as Twitter, artist formerly known as Spotify. All of those are at Debi Radio. and on our website, debiradio.com. And all of those are spelled DEBI radio. That's Debi with one B and an I.
And if you want to come and chat with us, come and join the Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. Once again, DEBI Radio.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time.